Hi, my name is Sean Bell, and I have bad time. What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's lesson. Today, we're talking about an absolute fundamental of your musicianship, and that is your time and how you feel the pulse in music. Now, if you are a brass player, or from my perspective, any instrumentalist outside of drums, piano, bass, or guitar, you probably have bad time as well. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. If you are not a piano player, bass player, guitar player, or drummer, you have bad time. Go ahead, ask your drummer friends, hey, do I have good time? If they're being honest with you, they'll say, yeah, your time is okay most of the time, but sometimes you drag a little bit or rush a little bit when you're playing syncopated rhythms. Now, for us as wind instrumentalists, we can ignore this problem and keep practicing in the same way we always have with our metronome, clicking on every single beat. However, I would encourage you to think more about practicing in the ways that rhythm section players do in order to improve this aspect of your musicianship. One caveat before we start today, nowhere today are we going to talk about using the metronome to just help with your technique. So often we go to the metronome as a way to slow us down in order to help us improve through technically challenging sections. That's not what this lesson is about. This lesson is about how do we improve our ability to feel a quarter note consistently over an entire measure, over 2 measures, over 4 bars, so that way we're always in the pocket with the rhythm section. All right, we're going to dive right in with a musical example today. I'm on the Voxman Etude book on page 11 in F major. This is a classic one out of this book that many people work on. So here I am playing it at around 90 beats a minute. That's a little slow for this etude, admittedly, but that's going to be a good place for us to explore some of these ways that we can use the metronome in a little different way to improve our time. All right, that's the most obvious way that we use the metronome. We have it clicking on every quarter note when we're hearing 4/4 or 2/4, and that gives us a steady pulse. The problem is that most of us tend to lose track of where that pulse is, not on the beats, it's in between the beats, or when we have to go longer periods of time without feeling that pulse. To help us work on this, we're going to slow our metronome way down, all the way down to 35 beats a minute. So that's really going to force us to feel the subdivision. Rather than having that metronome click here, and then here, and then here, we're going to have one click over here and one click way over here, and all this empty space in the middle that we need to fill up, not with more metronome clicks, but with the subdivision in our head. All right, let's go ahead and hear what this would sound like at 35 beats a minute. Now, I'm really trying to hear consistent 16th notes when I play this in my head. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a, to make sure I can fill up all that space in between each pulse that I'm going to hear. So let's check it out. Now, that can be challenging, and that's challenging for me to do that as well. And so what we want to do is we want to devise a little exercise to help us improve this aspect of our musicianship. So what we're going to do is all of those 8th notes, we're actually going to play the 16th notes inside of those. Whether they're tied over or just a single 8th note, we don't care. We're going to play everything as 16th notes rather than playing any other rhythm, so we can feel where that 16th note pulse is. And then we'll go back to playing it as written, and hopefully we'll still be able to hear that pulse in our head. So let's check out what that would sound like. This is a great exercise to do on any piece that has a lot of syncopation, that has a lot of tied over notes, to make sure you're not rushing through any of those tied over notes, that type of thing. But you might be asking yourself, Sean, well, why don't I just set my metronome to click 16th notes? That's going to keep me on track and it's going to be right on the money. And yes, it will. And that's a great practice strategy as well. And you might need to do that in order to get that consistent 16th note subdivision. However, if we really want to be able to play with other musicians and all be on the exact same page where time is, we need to all feel that subdivision in our head the same. So we need to practice feeling those 16th note subdivisions outside of the context of a metronome doing it for us. Now, once you're feeling pretty confident about those 16th notes and it's time to put this back up to the real tempo or at 90 beats a minute like we're doing today, there's a couple other things I think you should try to, again, firm up this time feel. The first thing we're going to do is, rather than having our metronome click 90 where we click every beat, we're going to cut that in half and we're going to make it click at 45. So that way we get a click only at the beginning of each measure. Again, trying to elongate that period that we have to be responsible for keeping a consistent beat. If you have a consistent 16th notes going in your head, as we just practiced, that should not be too difficult to do. Let's check out what that would sound like. Now, as you can hear, that doesn't sound any different than when I played it at 90 beats a minute. It's the same tempo. It's just how we're feeling where those pulses are is different. We have to be more accountable for keeping track of everything. Now, you can hear in all these examples today, I'm not 100% perfect on my time, and just because I'm talking about this in the lesson, by no means does that mean this is not something that I need to work on and do work on a fairly regular basis. All right, there we have this exercise in sort of a classical etude. What about if we want to do this in a jazz context? The same concepts hold true. Now today I'm going to think about playing rhythm changes, and I'm going to think my tempo being 100 beats per minute. Again, kind of a middle-ish ground for this type of tune. Now, when we're working as improvisers and we have less predetermined knowledge about like where our rhythms are going to be, we've got to be a little extra cognizant of maybe our tendencies when we're playing, about where we tend to rush, where we tend to drag. I know for me, when I am playing more syncopation or when I have more rests, I tend to rush. When I'm playing eighth note lines, it usually feels pretty stable with where my beat is because I have all that subdivision. However, when I'm resting and I have to just create the subdivision in my head, I tend to get ahead. So we really want to be careful and know, like, do I tend to rush? Do I tend to drag? And kind of act accordingly when we're doing these exercises. Now, when we start to put this into context on rhythm changes, I'm going to start with my metronome set at 100. That's actually going to be 200 beats a minute for my quarter note, but I'm already setting it to be clicking on beat 1 and beat 3. Now you can have it set on beat 2 and beat 4. That has never been as much as something I've liked to do. I really prefer to have that metronome clicking at the beginning of each measure or where the chords change. 2 and 4 has its benefits as well, but that's not something how I typically practice. So here we are with me playing the first two A sections of rhythm changes at half note equals 100. All right, that's relatively straightforward. So let's go through the same process here as we did on Boxman. We're going to cut that 100 in half, down to 50. And so now I'm only going to get a click at the beginning of each measure. And as we start to have longer and longer periods between clicks, what I really want to hear in my head is subdivision, yes, but also actually the rhythm section. I want to hear the drums playing dang, 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 dang in my head as I'm kind of improvising and hearing between each one of those clicks. That's going to help me really feel like I'm in the pocket and not just sounding like a robot trying to keep time with a metronome. All right, there's 50. Still felt really pretty comfortable for me to feel the time there. Now, if we cut that in half again to 25, that's where it's going to start to become a little more challenging. That is a click every 2 measures. Now, if you're really feeling ambitious and it's feeling like going all the way to a click every 2 measures is good, you can have it click every 4 measures. That becomes significantly more challenging, at least for me. And you'll hear in this example that I'm probably not going to be totally on the money the entire time, and that's okay. You know, this is a work in progress for most people, and especially when those beats get that far between, it's a little difficult to keep track the entire time. As tempos increase, that sort of ultimate slow tempo you're going to go at actually speeds up. So if you were doing this at a faster tempo, that bottom tempo would be faster as well, which actually can make it a little easier to feel where the time is. Not necessarily easier to execute at a fast tempo, but definitely easier to feel where the time is. So if you're feeling like you're not totally confident when we've split it down all the way to 1 click every 4 measures, just keep working at it. Maybe go back to 1 click every 2 measures, alternate between those two, and you'll find some confidence there. All right, as you could hear, I was not perfect on that by any means, so it's a work in progress for all of us. If you ask any good drummer, I guarantee you they have worked with the metronome in this way to really solidify, can I keep a consistent beat throughout an entire measure, 4 bars, section, entire tune? And we as horn players need to make sure we don't shirk that responsibility and say, hey, it's the rhythm section's responsibility to keep the time. I just sit up here and play a solo. No, it's all of our responsibility to keep the time. All right, we'll see all of you in the woodshed.